Hello guys, my name's Antoine from ATM Tech and welcome to the channel. So a few months ago I showed you guys a very special phone and that was the Samsung Z Fold 2. I did a first impressions and I raved about how great the phone was and I fell in love with it pretty much straight away. But a few months down the road, has my opinion changed? Let's find out. But before we do that, let's run the intro. So the Z Fold 2 is very much a phone that a lot of people are interested in, but most people will never have. And that's due to the massive price tag, roughly £1,800 or dollars depending where you're looking. But because it's such an interesting phone, people always want to keep half an eye on it. And after using it as my primary device from pretty much when it came out, it's definitely a phone that you can't get out without people asking about it. So the first key point about this phone, it's definitely a showstopper. What I found quite often is that if I'm using the phone folded up, it tends to fly completely under the radar. I could be texting, making a phone call, taking a photo. Most people won't take any notice. The moment you open that bad boy up, suddenly people start to notice and everyone wants to be your best friend. And there were two phrases that I would tend to hear over and over again. One, oh my gosh, is that the Fold? And two, oh my gosh, I've never seen one in real life.
That's what she said.
And to be honest, I imagine things will stay like this for quite a while until manufacturers figure out a way to bring the cost down of these folding devices. So when I wasn't using this phone to absolutely flex, how did I get on with it in general? I did notice that over time, the way I used the phone did change slightly. So one of my favorite things about the Z Fold 2 is that big outer screen. The screen is large enough for you to be able to do your everyday tasks without ever having to unfold the phone. Things like texting, checking your notifications, taking the odd photo here and there, you know, just the day-to-day stuff. At the start, the only time I did really unfold the phone is if I was gonna consume some content, Netflix, YouTube, that sort of thing. Or if I wanted to sort of browse through a website or look for some information where a larger screen really would help. And although I said the outer screen was adequate for texting, you would make one mistake maybe one every 15 words, which doesn't sound like a lot, and at the start it was a complete minor for me. Then over time, those mistakes started to add up and then it started to become a bit of an irritant. And I felt myself getting frustrated to the point where now, pretty much every single time I use the phone, I will unfold it, which on its own is absolutely fine. However, it did lead to a few things. One, it was virtually impossible to use the phone and multitask. Using this phone unfolded with one hand is just not viable. You do need two hands. But obviously, if you're using two hands, you don't have a hand free to do anything else. And as funny as it sounds, but I found that if you're using both hands to do a task, your brain then becomes fixated on that task and it becomes harder to think about anything else. Another byproduct of using the phone unfolded all the time is that you end up spending more time using the phone than what you intended. It's almost as though your brain has gone through the process, well, I'm concentrated on this, I'm using two hands, I may as well make something of it. Subconsciously, it was very difficult to open the phone, do one task and then close it back straight away. You do find yourself floating to other things that you had absolutely no intention of doing, but as I said, because the phone's open, you just do. I know people suffer from mindless scrolling with smartphones anyway, but with this phone, it was just 10 times worse. Another byproduct of using the phone unfolded is that it can make you look more engrossed than you actually are, and you can come off a bit antisocial. Let me explain. So with a regular smartphone, if you get a notification, you can just quickly pick it up, glance down, look at it, put it away, job's done. No one will probably even notice. But with the Fold, because you've got both hands on it, it looks as though it has your full attention. Now I know I said the outer screen is more than adequate for checking notification, but as I said, over time, my brain just subconsciously automatically opened this phone when I went to use it as opposed to going to the outer screen. And then all these things ended up leading towards worse battery life. At the start, I was getting through a whole day quite comfortably, and that was because I was predominantly using the outer screen, which obviously a smaller screen uses less battery. But with my new habits and changing the way I use the phone, I was kind of finding that by dinner time in the evening, I was on 10% and looking for a charger. So although battery life with smartphones generally is subjective anyway, I found that with the Fold, it was very much to the extreme. And I think 10 people with the same phone are going to have wide variations with how much battery life they get out. In terms of build, the Z Fold 2 is still very solid. The hinge is still smooth and has just the right of resistance, just as the day when I first opened it. The main display did come with a screen protector pre-installed and it still looks pretty much as fresh as the day when it was first opened. Not had any issues with the crease or anything else like that. I think one of the biggest teething issues when it comes to the Z Fold 2 is app support. I would say 7 out of 10 apps were able to rescale and resize between the smaller screen and the larger screen properly. With the incompatible apps, you'd have one of a few things happening. So if you went from the outer screen to the larger screen, you'd just get a scaled down window with just a load of empty space either side. But then what you'd also get on the flip side is if you went from the smaller screen to the larger screen, the app will take up more space on the screen itself and some of your text would get cut off. Getting around this wasn't a big deal. All you had to do was just close the app and reopen it and it would be fine. But the problem is when it comes to apps like Facebook and Instagram, which those two I had issues with, quite often when you close down the app and reopen it, because they refresh so often, the last thing you were looking at is probably gone. So that was quite frustrating. Quickly touch on the cameras. Honestly, out of all the smartphones I've used, this is probably the phone that I've used the camera the least. So I am one of these people who likes to take a bit of extra time when taking photos. If I'm taking a photo with a smartphone, I'll always hold it in landscape. The problem with the Z Fold 2 is that if you take a photo in landscape while it's closed, the viewfinder is far too small and you can't really see what you're taking a picture of. But then if you take a picture while the phone is unfolded, you look like one of those old people that are taking pictures with iPads and no one wants to be that person. So I never really found situations where I felt comfortable using the camera, which is a shame because I know this does have a good camera, but I just didn't really use it very much. So that's a quick rundown of all the things that really stood out to me about this phone. But the question I get constantly asked is it worth it? And that's a very difficult question to answer, but compared to last year with the Fold 1, it is a little bit easier to answer now. I think the easiest way to answer the question is that I think as of 2020, the price is justified for the technology that it has. However, I still think there's very few people that should be buying this phone. If you do have your heart set on this phone, at the very least, pick one up and try one out and see how it feels in the hand. It's a lot of money and I wouldn't want anyone to be disappointed, especially when people these days are keeping their phones for sort of 2 to 3 years. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed my insight on the Fold 2. It was a bit of a review, but kind of not. But if you like this type of content, feel free to subscribe and a like is always appreciated. But anyway, I'm Antoine, hope you enjoyed the video and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.